guys, I'm Becky with All Aspects Restored and Recycled, and this is our third video to our how-to series on refinishing a piece of furniture using Wise Owl's chalk synthesis paint. And today we're going to be painting with the color Prussian Blue, which I'm really excited about. It's a beautiful color. This piece of furniture, in our first video, we showed you how to clean it and scuff it up to properly prep it in order to paint it. And then in our second video, we went over priming, and this piece of furniture has gotten 2 coats of the Wise Owl's clear primer. So it's dried overnight now. Really after 4 to 6 hours after priming, I could have painted it, but this has dried overnight, so our sideboard is ready to paint. So let's talk a little bit about the chalk synthesis paint. The reason why I love the Wise Owl, and I keep looking over here, I have my little table next to me, so let's pull it out. So I've actually already opened up this can. The nice thing about the chalk synthesis paint, there's 0 VOCs in it, so we're actually painting right inside of my shop. There's no smell, so it's non-toxic, which is obviously a good thing, right? I'm going to be using our Klingon brush. I tend to gravitate and always paint with the Klingon brushes. The Klingons are a synthetic brush. They come in flat. When we primed in our second video, I used the F50, the larger flat. Today I grabbed the 035. Really because this has, there's a couple of different areas within this piece, and so in order to use one brush, I was just grabbing really what I felt like was the most universal and what I'm comfortable with. The oval series are great because it is such a very universal brush. The ovals you can use for round areas, get into smaller areas. You can see the bristles, and I apologize, my brushes are very loved, so there's kind of some paint there on the stem. And so again, there's flats. So if you're doing a lot of flat areas, bureaus, chests, cabinets, a lot of real flat areas, the flat series is great, and it goes from a 30 to a 50, so a small, medium, and large. There's rounds, which are nice for like chair spindles and a lot of round areas. They're great for blending. And then again, the ovals are kind of our most universal brush, where you can use it for round areas, flat areas, and because the sideboard has flat tops, flat sides, but then it's got kind of like narrow legs, narrow inside, so for the sake of convenience and what was kind of best for the overall piece, we're going to go with the oval today. So these brushes are great because the paint is self-leveling, and so you don't want to deposit too much of it onto your piece because we want to avoid brush strokes, right? So the length of the bristles works where the brush is self-leveling, the paint self-leveling, and we kind of follow a few steps. We can really limit our brush strokes altogether, okay? Just for a nice smooth finish. So what we're gonna do is, first of all, I'm gonna go ahead. I've already stirred up my paint, but I want to make sure I just show you guys. I'm just going to use my paint stick here, make sure I stir it up pretty well. I'm going to brush that off onto the side here. Some tools I kind of always have around when I'm painting is my paint stick to stir it up. My can of paint. I usually have a mister bottle or a spray water bottle that I can mist. Shop towels are always kind of key for me, just because drips, or you're working with paint, you never know when you're gonna make a mess. And then these right here are a 320 soft touch sponge, so these we use a lot in between our coats. So again, the Wise Owl paint is a clay based mineral paint. So after the paint's dried, which usually it's your coat of paint will be dry after about 2 hours. So you can usually dry to the touch after an hour, and then dry after 2 hours. So again, it's all weather dependent, humidity dependent. But then we'll use our soft touch in between our coats of paint. So, and we'll go over that a little bit more as well. Okay. So clay-based mineral chalk paint. We're using Prussian blue. I have my Klingon brush. I'm just gonna go about halfway in, okay? And then, this is such a pretty color. So what I love about the Wise Owl is honestly, there's awesome coverage. It's sometimes hard to show in the videos to actually show you what great coverage there is. The paint is, we get asked this a lot, how many coats should you do? It's 2 coats, so almost every piece of furniture we do 2 coats. And then going back to that primer, if you primed your piece, you'll generally use less paint, which is another benefit. So I'm following my wood grain, and I'm doing just long strokes. What's important, I'm going to remember these things as I'm talking through it, but what's important to say too is that my brush, whenever I'm working with any of the chalk style paints, my brush is always damp, okay? If you feel like your paint is just a little bit too thick, you could always use your water and then give it a little bit of a spritz onto your brush. I'll have to say though, what I love about the Wise Owl is that the consistency, it's just a really nice smoothie consistency, and then I actually don't feel that it's not too thick, it's not too thin. It goes on beautifully. I'm just doing nice long strokes. Okay, this is a water-based product, so it's really important, and we say this to everybody in our shop all the time, don't overwork it. And it's just paint, guys. You can always lightly sand and go over it. If you hate your color, you can go over that. This color is gorgeous. So what I mean by not overworking it is that even though we say it's, really, a lot of times it'll be 20 minutes and it'll look like it's dry, but really after about an hour. But I don't want to go back and start overworking this area, because there's no need to deposit more paint onto my piece than's needed. You don't want it to kind of, buckle up on you. So the first coat we really just want to get on. I'm always conscious to making sure though that the direction of my brush and my strokes, making sure I give good coverage. Without applying too much. In the Klingon, you see I have it only about halfway, just kind of going along the side and kind of scraping off any excess that I don't need. So what I'll do is get the top on so you can see it. I like to keep videos nice and short and sweet. So I probably will get the top on, allow you guys to see the color, and then we'll hit pause. I'll paint the front, and then we can chat more about some tips and tricks on utilizing it. So I would say, I paint for a few reasons. I paint because I love it. I paint because it's relaxing. I paint because it's great to be creative. And then, on the other end, how awesome is it that these old pieces of furniture are so much more solid than you can really find in stores these days when it comes to the new furniture. And so often, people have these beautiful old pieces that are, we're rural here, so we hear all the time, I have it in my barn, and it's stuff in the barn, or we hear it in the attic, So people have all these old pieces, or maybe they're family pieces. So pieces that are, stuff in the garage or the attic or the barn, or they're just not being used, and why go out and buy a whole new piece of furniture that most likely is not anywhere near as solid and as well made as that piece of furniture that you have? And then if you paint it, then you can follow the proper steps to painting it, and then paint it, you really can create a whole new beautiful piece, and it'll match your current decor. So you can reuse the pieces that you have and then paint them to match your decor. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead, you can see how beautiful this color is. Again, it's Prussian blue, and I wanna be right back to you. I'm gonna go ahead and paint the front of this here, and then we'll talk a little bit more about some tips and tricks in using the Wise Owl Chalk Synthesis paint. Okay guys, we have our first coat of our Wise Owl Chalk Synthesis paint in Prussian blue on our sideboard. What I love about the Chalk Synthesis paint is there is just excellent coverage. There is great adhesion to your furniture, especially with the proper prep. Here at All Aspects, we paint a lot of furniture for both our customers and we sell a lot of furniture, and so for us it's always key to make sure that we prep the piece properly, we use a good product, because we want to make sure that, you know, the customer's not going to go home and be able to scrape it right off. So you know, we carry this line because I truly feel like it's a great line, and that when our customers are coming in to do their own pieces, you know, they won't have any problems. So a few tips and tricks for you guys, you know, at home when you are painting your own furniture. Again, work with a damp brush, a synthetic brush, a brush that is meant for these chalk style paints. Again, here we're a huge fan of the Klingon brushes. I have one coat on. We are going to allow this to dry for a few hours, and then we'll come back and we'll do a second coat and show you some tips in applying your second coat. So we are using a pint of paint right now to paint this piece. The Wise Owl paints come in a 16 ounce. You could get it in a 32 ounce or even a gallon. So a 16 ounce is what we've opened for this. That covers about 80 square feet. A quart will cover about 160 square feet. But honestly, with this sideboard, reach over, I mean, we still have more than half of our pint left. So with this sideboard, we'll be able to get this piece done, and honestly probably even have enough for a little side table. And then on the inside, you know, we painted the inside of this as well. So this piece is going to be painted on the inside, you know, all the way around, and then the back of the legs. So, and there's actually a really pretty detailed piece that goes on top. So that's another important thing to mention too. If you have any, you know, like this it was screwed in the back, and there's a little detailed piece, which I'm actually looking at below the camera. But so we took that off in order to paint that separately. I usually take off all the hardware. We talked about in video 1 how this piece we're going to replace the hardware. As far as the hinges, you know, these were easy to paint around, so I left the doors on. You can choose to take the doors off, or you can keep them on. A lot of the times I'll just take a little bit more of a detailed brush and go around the hinges. It's a lot easier than taking them off on these old pieces for 2 reasons. One, sometimes on the old pieces, the screws are really in there, and then when you take the doors off and put them back on, it doesn't necessarily go back the same way. So it depends, it's piece to piece. A lot of the times I like to just leave them on, that way I know that they are exactly where they're comfortable, and they don't always go back on the same way. And just be very careful, and like I said, you can use a more of a smaller detailed brush to kind of get around those. So we're going to go ahead and give our piece about 2 to 3 hours to dry. We'll come back. Tools I have ready for my second coat would be my I have a 320 soft sponge, or it's finishing pad that I'm going to go over to make sure. Again, this is a clay-based mineral chalk paint, so I'm going to knock out any kind of grits, make it kind of nice and smooth. So these finishing pads are really nice. My preference is usually the 320s, so it's nice and fine. I can knock out any grit, and then go ahead and apply my second coat. And with that, I generally do have my mister bottle, especially with my second coat, because I like to give my brush a couple of nice little spritzes just to make sure that when I'm applying it, the paint glides on, nice and smoothly. And again, a couple of little tips and tricks like that, along with using good products, and you can really both brush and paint, and you can really eliminate any brush strokes, which gives you a nice professional finish. Okay, we'll see you after the paint dries. Okay, our piece is now dry. It's been drying for about 2 to 3 hours. Our first coat is completely dry. So what we're gonna do now is I have a soft touch sanding sponge in fine. So you wanna get a very fine sanding piece of sandpaper or sanding sponge between a 320 and a 400 grit. And the reason we're gonna do this is, again, Wise Owl is a clay-based mineral chalk paint. So when we put our hand over it, although it's a little bit smooth, to really have a nice smooth finish and knock out any grit, we're just gonna take our fine sandpaper, and again, I'm not sanding it, I'm not doing it, I'm swiping over it. So I'm not trying to take off the paint, I'm just trying to knock out any grit. So what I'm gonna do is just go over my whole piece, just like this, and then just knock out any grit. So just like that, I'll do the whole thing. It doesn't have to be very long, just to make it nice and smooth prior to putting on our second coat. So you'll see what'll happen is the color will slightly change, and that's okay because we're gonna put a second coat of paint on. Okay, so we're just taking quick swipes, knock out any grit, and you'll notice that the color will look a little bit different. So you can see how it just kind of looks like it's white on the blue. That'll always happen, and nothing to worry about. So we're gonna put a second coat on, so obviously that'll go away. But even between your second coat prior to sealing it, because again, the chalk style paints are very porous, and so they all do need to be sealed. So we will be doing a fourth video on showing you how you can seal it. You could seal your chalk paints with either wax, or you can use clear coat varnishes. So after you knock out the grit between the first and second coat, again, you're going to be painting between the second coat and sealing it. Once you go to seal it, this discoloration will actually go away. So, and it'll brighten right back up. So if we were to have done 2 coats already and we were to be adding our wax on there, the color will just brighten and it'll enrich right back up, okay? So this is not a permanent thing. It's just important because a lot of times our customers are like, I went and ran my sand block over it like you said, and it changed the color. That's not permanent, okay? So again, we're just gonna use a 320, you could use a 400, a very fine piece of sandpaper, and that's just gonna knock out the grit, okay? And it'll make it so it feels nice and smooth. So from there, at the beginning of the video, we talked about working with a damp brush. So this brush has been sitting in water in the back, so it is a little bit damp. If it was not, you can actually just take a little bit of water, sprish a little on anyway, and then just pat it with your shop towel. So when you are working between coats, you can actually wash your brush fully clean with warm soap and water, or you can suspend it. So the nice thing about these Klingon brushes is that, and I went like this because you can either hang them, or we use a lot of time a clothespin in a mason jar with water, and we'll just suspend it so that while we're out here in the shop or waiting for paint to dry, that the water will actually pull the paint off for you, so it's kind of self-cleaning back there, in between our coats of paint. So this has been cleaned and it's damp, and so now we're going to go ahead and put our second coat on. If you feel like with the sandpaper that we just did, you can feel any, but again, you're not really sanding it, you're just swiping it. So a lot of times I'll just use a damp blue shop towel and just kind of wherever I just sanded, I'll wipe it back. So I just want to show you 2 things. Most of the time when we apply our second coat, it's the same way we did the first, okay? If you feel that your paint isn't gliding the way that you want to, in between, as you're working on it, I'll just give it a little spritz, and it just helps me. And don't worry, you can see little squirts on there, you're gonna be going right back over it. So you wanna work with a nice damp brush with your paint, and in doing so with long strokes, this will help eliminate any brush strokes that you may have. So the Wise Owl Chalk Synthesis paints work great with full coverage with 2 coats. So we're going to give this 2 full coats. When we're all done, I do let our pieces dry for 24 hours prior to putting on a top coat or wax. And the reason why is I just want to give the paint some time to cure before I seal it. That way, especially with wax, you know, if you're buffing on and off the wax, you don't want to be pulling and tugging on the paint too much before it's had at least about 24 hours or overnight at least to dry. Everything that we share in our videos is really based on our best practice here. It's not necessarily what you have to do. Most of the time people are watching lots of videos. You may hear, you know, somewhat different things. And so we just like to say that based on our experience, this is what, you know, we do at our shop and what, you know, we let, you know, teach our customers to do. So, but you got to find out, you know, what works for you. And a lot of the times it's really based on trial and error. And so I say 24 hours, but a lot of times we'll be working on a piece, you know, in the afternoon, like now, and then I'll come in the morning and, you know, put my wax on there or my varnish, depending on the piece and how I feel I want to have it protected. So I'm going to continue. I want to get this whole piece a nice, even second coat, and then we'll come back in tomorrow and we'll seal it and we'll share with you the 4th video and the process of how we seal our pieces here. So thank you so much for watching, and definitely follow us on our YouTube channel, which is under All Aspects Restored and Recycled, and we hope to bring you more tutorial videos to help you when you're working with your chalk style paints. So I'm Becky at All Aspects, and all of the Wise Owl products are available on our website at allaspectsrestoredandrecycled.com. Thanks so much.